Doug Polk's life recently has been anything but boring. Becoming a dad, being in the middle of a poker drama, hosting the lodge, pumping out content like a madman, and nearly winning his 4th bracelet. All of that just in this year. You gotta wonder though, does he ever wish he could go back in time and pursue what made him rise to the top? Crushing poker legends in heads-up battles online.
Moving on, I've had to do a lot of thinking over the last few days. I can't do this. I need a moment.
To this day, Isildur is still best known for his loose and aggressive, maybe even Maniac style. He used big bets, including overbets, before most people did, and just didn't hesitate to throw money around. But he didn't just blast off every hand he decided to play. Yes, he would 3-bet a weak hand like 4-9 suited and barrel it off. But that is actually happening according to the solver. Very rarely, because the 3-bet preflop is a very low frequency play, but barreling off post-flop with a 9-high gut shot is completely solver approved. He was also capable of barreling off queen-high as a bluff. But that's also exactly what the solver's doing. At the same time, he was really good at getting value, a lot of value, by betting. Not only his nut hands, but also really thin value bets. In this hand, for example, he overbets pocket jacks on a flush and 1-card straight board, and gets called by worse. So he was definitely kind of balanced, in the sense that he used big bets both as value bets and as bluffs. The biggest problem, however, is making sure to not overdo it in many spots. Most spots don't naturally provide you with the perfectly balanced amount of hands that are value bets and bluffs. What do I mean by that? Let's take this spot as an example. Isildur opens king 6 off and Doug calls. Isildur bets big on the flop, which is fine, and continues to barrel on the turn. This is not happening according to PioSolver, which for this big bet size prefers to go more polar, and almost bets no 6x, but rather top pairs or better, and 5x or lower. On the river, things become complicated. When the board runs out 3, 4, 5, 6, it is quite difficult to find hands that are bluffs on the river. Because the most obvious hands that are barreled on the turn as a bluff, mostly semi-draws, so a gut shot or an open-ender, are now either straight, like deuce x or 7x, or have rivered a pair. And since there's no flush draw possible at any point either, finding natural bluffs is quite difficult. Isildur seems to recognize that fact, and decides to turn his pair of 6s into a bluff. By betting, he would likely get many single top pair hands to fold, because Doug would also know that it is hard to find bluffs here. So the idea behind the play shows Isildur's great understanding of the game. However, the problem is that once he decides king 6 is a good hand to do this with, what do you think he would do if he had queen 6 here? Or jack 6? Or ace 4? Or king 4? Queen 4? Jack 4? 9-4 suited? 8-4 suited? Maybe even ace 6? All of a sudden, he could potentially have way too many bluffs in this spot. And that's not even considering that hands like king 6 wouldn't even be a bet on a turn in the first place. Without a system to decide which of these potential bluff candidates are best bluffed, he might just go with all of them. That's where solvers can be a great help. By looking at a solver solution, we can build a strategy that takes the best hands to bluff with and be balanced by letting go of the rest. That's why observing which hands your opponent chooses to bluff with and which they give up with can be a powerful indicator if they bluff too often or too little. But to know which hands are good or bad bluffs in the first place, you need to know the principles that are in place. In this case, the solver would prefer lower pairs, especially 3x as a bluff. Likely because they could get more better hands to fold, namely 4x, 5x and 6x. Since King 6 would beat most of those, it has more showdown value and is put into the range that checks behind. To find correlations like this on your own, you need to know how to work with solvers effectively. That means not just skimming through a simulation and trying to memorize and emulate the outputs. Instead, you want to explore the underlying principles, which you can then apply to other situations and use to exploit various player types. To help you with that, I am currently working on a course that teaches you exactly that. Instead of just showing you my analysis, I want you to be able to do your own, so that you can elevate your game to the next level yourself. If you're interested in that, you can sign up below and I'll notify you as soon as the course is completed so that you get early access. In this spot, Doug simply had it. But what if he is put in a situation that is much more difficult? In this hand, he 3-bets aces, gets called, and sees his c-bet being raised. He calls, and Isildur continues to barrel for a bit over half pot on the 5 of hearts on the turn. Doug calls again, as folding is out of the question against an aggressive opponent like Isildur. Raising also isn't a good option, since Isildur's line mainly represents either 2-pair plus or a bluff with rather little equity. So jamming in another 150k would only isolate Doug against better hands, while not folding out enough equity. On the river, Isildur, unsurprisingly, jams, which leaves Doug with the tough decision of calling off 150k, almost 200 big blinds, or a used Lamborghini with just a pair. According to the solver, aces wouldn't be a terrible call in terms of EV, but his actual combo would almost always be a fold. However, this only holds true against a perfectly balanced opponent. So when playing against a human, you'd rather think about which hands your opponent might be able to bluff here. In a video 3 years later, Doug himself explained that he could expect Isildur to have Jack-8 suited, Jack-9 suited, and even 9-8 offsuit combos that would take this line.
I'm anticipating Jack-9, Jack-8, 9-8, all of which I think call pre-flop both suited and offsuit combos. I'm anticipating all of those hands raising the flop.
Of course, he would also be able to have 6-8 suited and 6-3 suited that would make sense. But if you assume Isildur to never give up any of these possible bluffs and always barrel them through, which Doug would have all reason to believe, his bluffs heavily outweigh his value hands. And aces would be a profitable call. Isildur did in fact have a hand which according to the solver would sometimes raise the flop, but only with a low frequency. On the turn though, it would almost never bet. So seeing him barrel this combo through is another indicator that the assumption of him having too many bluffs on this river might be pretty accurate. Even though on this day, Doug reportedly ended up losing $1 million to Isildur,
I lost $1 million that day.
all hands combined, he was up 500k against the Swede when the battle ended.
Man, I'm so glad that wasn't real. I'm gonna continue to make content.
If you like this type of video, you will love this one, where we dive into the time when Isildur was at his peak.